Welcome to 6.4, completing the square. We're going to solve quadratic equations by using the square root property and by completing the square. So let's start with what the square root property is. For any real number, n, if x squared equals n, then x equals positive or negative the square root of n. So we're going to use this. We start with the original equation, x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 49. And then we're going to factor the perfect square trinomial, which is the x squared plus 10x plus 25, is really x plus 5 squared. We can square root both sides, so we get x plus 5 equals positive or negative square root of 49. Square root of 49 is 7. Okay, so we can subtract 5. But the issue is we're going to write it as two equations because it's positive and negative 7. So we subtract 5, negative 5 plus 7, negative 5 minus 7. So our two answers are x equals 2 and negative 12. Our next example, equation with irrational roots. You have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 32. We can factor the perfect square trinomial, which is x minus 3. Square root both sides, we get x minus 3 equals positive or negative square root of 32. Square root of 32 does simplify to 4 radical 2. We do add 3 to both sides, so we get 3 plus or minus 4 square root of 2. And then we write it as two equations, 3 plus 4 radical 2 and 3 minus 4 radical 2. And these would be our answers if we want them in exact form. If we want it to simplify, we approximate by saying 8.7 or 2.7. So 8.7 or negative 2.7. Next, completing the square. So there's a couple of steps. So to complete the square of quadratic equation of the form x squared plus bx, we first find half of b, which is the coefficient of x. And then step 2, we square that result from step 1. In step 3, we add the result to step 2 to x squared plus bx. Okay. So let's see this done. So we have x squared plus 12x plus c. So we take half of 12. So we get 6. Then we square it to get 36. And then we add it to our original x squared plus 12x. So it's x squared plus 12x plus 36. Of course, it's going to equal 0 because we want to solve an equation. Could be equal to a number as well, though. For example 4. X squared plus 8x minus 20 equals 0. We want this to be a perfect square trinomial. And this is not right now. So we're going to add 20 to both sides to get the 20 out of our trinomial. We take half of 8 and then square it to get 16, so we're going to add 16 to both sides of the equation. On the left we have a perfect square trinomial now. It's x plus 4 squared, and then 20 and 16 make 36. Okay, so we have now completed the square, and then we can do the square root property. X plus 4 equals positive or negative 6, because the square root of 36 is 6. Then we write it as two equations, negative 4 plus 6, negative 4 minus 6. And we get x equals 2 and negative 10. Okay, example 5. Equation with a is not 1. So we're going to first, it's not a perfect square trinomial. We're going to divide by the coefficient in the quadratic term. So we're going to divide everything by 2. So we get x squared minus 5 halves x plus 3 halves. We're going to subtract 3 halves from both sides. And then we're going to complete the square. So we're going to do negative 5 halves divided by 2 squared to get 25 sixteenths. We're going to add 25 sixteenths both sides. We're going to write the left side as a perfect square by factoring. So we get x minus 5/4 squared. And then we're going to add negative 3 halves and 25 sixteenths to get 1/16. We're going to use the square root property, so we get x minus 5/4 equals positive or negative 1/4. Then we're going to add 5/4 to each side, and then we're going to write it as two equations. We simplify both sets, we get 3/2 and 1. So that's our solution set. All right, our last example, equation with complex solutions. So we got x squared plus 4x plus 11. Notice that it's not a perfect square. We're going to rewrite it so the left side is in the form x squared plus bx. So we're going to subtract 11 from both sides. Then we're going to take half of b, which is 4. So half of 4 squared is 4, so we're going to add 4 to each side. We're going to write the left side as a perfect square by factoring. So we get x plus 2 squared. On the right side we get negative 7. Square root property. So we get x plus 2 equals positive or negative square root of negative 7. Because it's a negative 7, it's I square root of 7. We're going to subtract 2 from both sides as well. So negative 2 plus or minus I square root of 7. We're going to write it as two equations. So it's negative 2 plus I square root of 7 and negative 2 minus I square root of 7. That's it for completing the square. Good luck on the practice.